Ask the Podcast Coach for October 5th, 2024.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. That means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting. What is up with my voice today? I sound like Peter Brady from the School of Podcasting.com. Joining me right over there is Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Always good to be here, maybe on the last gasp of summer here in the United States. I think it's still a little warm in a lot of places, but it's cool here. Welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach.
Yeah, I woke up this morning, went out, and it was like, oh, I think I need a coat of some sort. So,
well, don't put the coat on for too long. They're expecting like 95 to here today. So, I don't think summer is completely over yet. I mean, for some people, they really love that. I'm not a big fan. I'm ready for fall.
Yeah, well, I just was notified by Ecamm that we're not going live on LinkedIn. I actually reconnected that this morning. So, yay technology.
Right.
So, which is why you always go to askthepodcastcoach.com/live, which thankfully is YouTube, and that doesn't seem to have an issue. And I just realized, here's the interesting thing about Ecamm is you end up with 5 million windows out. And apparently, somewhere along the way, I have closed the chat window. So I'm looking for, our awesome people that are in the chat window, and I see interview chat. Here we go, comments and reactions. There's the chat room. Excellent, because I was getting all worried. And, when I get worried, there's one way that'll, calm me down. That's, of course, with an awesome hot piping cup of Java of whatever that stuff is Jim is pouring. Oh, wait. It was so weird you were pouring without sound effects. I was like, how does that work?
It's not. Is it really a pour if you don't hear it?
Yes, but that is brought to you by our good Mark over at podcastbranding.co because, they see you before they hear you. And Mark is an award-winning podcast graphic artist, and he's a podcaster, which it's like 2 for the price of 1. So you don't have to explain to him what the heck is a podcast, and he's going to make you look amazing. He's done a lot of my artwork, my latest one, Podcast Hot Seat. I love with the flaming blue Yeti on the chair. And he's going to sit down with you one-on-one and make sure that your branding is in alignment with your show, which includes your website, everything else. And if you're like, Dave, I don't even have a website. Well, Mark can help you with that. In fact, if there's anything that you're going to have in front of the audience, Mark's the way to go. He's going to make you look really professional and just make sure that everything's in alignment with your brand. And you're not going to get that on some guy on Fiverr. So there's only one place to go, and that is, of course, podcastbranding.co.
About choked to death over here. Big thanks to our. You ever had that? It just like
out
all
of nowhere,
it just comes out of you. Yes. Big thanks to our good friend Dan Lefebvre over there, based on true story podcast.com. This week, he has historical events and premiere. Alexander, 61, Black Hawk Down, and the Social Network. Those are available. And Dan always does a great job. Spends a ton of time, gets great guests, and does a lot of research. So if you looking for something new to listen to, he's a good friend of the podcast. Check him out today. Based on a true story podcast.com. And Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
And I'm seeing in the chat room that the LinkedIn thing is a LinkedIn thing, not so much an Ecamm thing.
Yeah.
And it's the term I'm seeing thrown around a lot is wonky. It is wonky. So
no, it's listen, the Facebooks and the LinkedIns and the X's or Twix or Twitter or whatever you want to call it thing. The Instagram, they're not exactly sure if they really want to support podcasters live streaming. I know that's not a lot of people are saying that, but I just get this feeling, especially Facebook, like they're always messing around with the interface, and we do, and then we don't, and then I don't know, and and then it works, and then it doesn't work, and I just get the feeling either that's one of two scenarios. There's an internal battle going on in these organizations, whether they're going to support it or not, or they throw some resources at it, then they stop looking at it. Then they decide, oh, we need to do some updates. Then they break it in doing the updates. And right, you just it's they want to do it, but they don't want to give it enough resources. It doesn't work half the time. I hear people complaining on Facebook in the podcasting groups.
Yeah.
That seems to be the number one complaint, getting live streaming working to these platforms. I'm just not sure they're 100% committed to it. YouTube, on the other hand, doesn't seem to do anything, and it just seems to work. And maybe that's the key is stop messing with it.
Yeah.
Like get it working and then leave it alone.
Well, I thought it might have been a Libsyn thing because Libsyn had a way to post your stuff to Facebook and it would break on a regular basis. And eventually the developers would get over and do that. And I was like, well, maybe it's a Libsyn thing until I came to Podpage. And then it's the exact same thing. Like you said, Facebook will change something. And by the way, they're not going to let you know we're changing things. So your stuff is going to break. It just all of a sudden you go into your inbox and everybody's like, hey, it didn't post to Facebook to where I want to go. Okay, thanks for letting me know. And they really freak out. And I always kind of want to go, have you ever heard of this? It's a strategy. It's called copy and paste. You can copy the link to your episode on your website, put it on Facebook, and, there you go. But it's like, no, it has to be automated. It has to be. And and what gets me is how much time somebody wanted Podpage to integrate with make.com, which is basically Zapier.com with a little cheaper price tag and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, well, we don't integrate with make.com right now. We integrate with Zapier, but not make.com. And the amount of time he was spending trying to, and I'm not like, look, you do you, but I see people do this, but just the amount of time we spend trying to automate something when if we just did it manually would be like a fraction of the time. Like I'm going to spend 15 hours troubleshooting this automation where you can copy and paste a lot of things for 15 hours. And I just kind of go, really? Like, can we not, this doesn't work that way. Just, and they were just like, well, yeah, but I just want to click, first of all, and now with AI, but I mean, they get the stuff and they just want to click a button and have it go everywhere. And I get that. Why wouldn't you want that? Except that not every platform is the same. What works on Twitter may not work on LinkedIn and vice versa. So it's just, I just see people spending, hours of time troubleshooting things that I'm like, you do know if you did this manually, it would take seconds, not even minutes, seconds to fix. So that's always kind of interesting. So I do have, this is kind of the same old, but it was just one of those things that I always sound like I'm anti-YouTube. And I just want people to go in with their eyes open, right? So this guy came on and he said, I looked at my audience retention at YouTube and I was like, oh, that's a good way to start a thing. And he says, I couldn't say what is on usual podcast platforms, but that's not a metric that anyone else can check for. Well, nope, sorry. You can see at least your percentage completed on Apple Podcasts if you go to podcastconnect.apple.com or if you go to the dashboard for Spotify for podcasters. It says it feels discouraging because what that means in effect, he says, my typical audience retention is around 25%. Now, I'm an old teacher, so to me, 60% is a D, and anything beneath that is, yeah. So it feels discouraging because that means, in effect, that only 2 of 4 people on average are actually listening to the whole way through. My philosophy has always been if I get double digits on my listeners for an episode, then the effort to make the episode was worth it. But I guess in my mind, I assumed a view meant that folks were listening for longer than 3 to 5 minutes. Well, I wish I knew. If somebody knows what the actual spec for a view is on YouTube, I think if you go to a video, it counts as a view. I think if you just sniff it, it makes me doubt my numbers that Spotify gives me. Spotify counts a play or a download or a stream that's longer than 60 seconds. Again, until now, I assume that folks were listening for longer than 60 seconds, but if YouTube is an indicator, are they really just clicking away for a few minutes? Well, keep in mind that YouTube stats are different than Spotify stats. So it's two completely different platforms. It leaves me wondering, how accurate is this metric, which I love that, well, surely it can't be that people are only listening to 25% of my stuff on YouTube. No, it can. I remember at Libsyn, I'd have people like, hey, it's been a week and I don't have any downloads. And I'm like, yeah, that's because you don't have any downloads. Like, that's just the way it works. Is this typical for more YouTubers? Does this mean I should change my format since it's not keeping people engaged? There's a novel idea. Am I overthinking it? Maybe a little, but not. You're headed in the right direction. I avoided looking at that stat for a long time. That right there is, I don't understand this. Like, I'd rather think I'm good than look at the stat to see if maybe I'm boring the bejesus out of people. Because I knew it would leave me feeling dejected. So I'd rather live in my own Joker world, my fantasy world, where I'm great, than actually make something great. I want to find a way to use this information in a constructive way. To answer any basic questions you might have about the podcast and its format, I run a read-along book club podcast. We'll cover, on average, 3 chapters of a book per episode. More if the chapters are short. Episodes average more or less an hour. New episodes every 2 weeks. And I just thought, well, if you look at our show here, I don't know what our percentage is, but it's not anywhere near what it is on audio. Audio just outperforms in terms of completion percentage. Like, it just spanks YouTube. It goes, YouTube, come here. It bends it over its knee and just spanks it and says, I don't know what's going on at YouTube, but you're going to have people listening longer on an audio format. So,
well, it's a different environment. I mean, it's a different listening environment. I think people come to YouTube differently than they come to their audio podcasts. I mean, I think in most cases, you've got folks listening on a walk or in a workout or on a drive. I think they've planned to listen to it in most cases. And so you're getting, you're there for them to get you through this time, mowing the lawn, whatever. I have guys that ping me all the time from their lawnmowers that say, I'm listening to you on Home Gadget Geeks on my lawnmower. Yeah. So I think the audio side of things has a whole different listening experience than a YouTube does. Now, yeah, YouTube's trying to change that. I mean, they're trying to make a run at, hey, come here to YouTube and get your music here or get your whatever, right, to do that. But I just think lots of folks go to YouTube to figure stuff out, and I've got some subscribers where I watch. I'm very interested in some of the work that they're doing on a regular basis, so I watch that. But I just think the viewing experience is different. And long play podcast on YouTube, I mean, do people listen to them or watch them? Yeah. Are they gonna get big numbers? Unless you're you're a solid niche and you can gather people that are super excited about your content. I think it's an uphill battle. I'm not saying you can't do it. Critical Role did it, right? Rogan does it. So right. There are some who do it, right? It is possible, but man, you better be good. Like, you really got to have you really got to, and I don't know if it's much as the content as it is matching your content to your audience, getting your audience super excited about whatever that is. And, whether it's role-playing games or smoking dope, with Rogan, I think you just got to match your show to your audience and find them there. And I think, Dave, we still are relying way too much on, we hear this, I hear this phrase all the time. Well, YouTube's the number 2 search engine. So people should just, I'm going to go there and it's going to be great. I don't know. No, I don't think any of that. You've got to do the hard work to draw people to your channel and get folks in and doing stuff. Like, you still got to pull them in. And I just don't.
And hold them.
I think, yeah, no, for sure. And be interesting and be engaging, right? Whatever that means for your audience. And so you just got to do you're going to have to do some legwork. And we say this all the time, but get a little lucky. You got to get a little lucky, catch catch something, and then when I think this is where a lot of podcasters go wrong, is that they catch a break. They don't see it as a break. They get super busy with their audience or whatever. It means more work, and they're like, I can't do all this work. And then that wave goes away pretty fast. And when the sun is shining, it's time to make hay. And when you're busy with your audience, when you're getting a lot of emails or a lot of engagement or whatever, don't mistreat that as, oh, I'm doing too much support, or I don't have time for all of this. Well, oftentimes that's what it takes to get things rolling. You're going to have to give it a lot of your time to if that's what you're looking for.
I'll be interested to see. Right now, I saw it this week. Somebody posted a screenshot. Haley something, the Haktua girl was number 3. It was like Joe Rogan, The Daily, and then Haktua girl. And I was like, all right, so she's got an audience right now. The question is, can she keep them? I have yet to listen. I want to go listen just to hear what she's doing. But I was like, all right, here's your, you're on minute 2 of your 15 minutes. What are you going to do with it?
It's a great example though of someone who's riding the wave, right? Who didn't shy away from it, who is probably in her schedule has probably blown up to, she's not getting any time for herself. She's on media. I mean, she was on these shows. She was in media. She was doing all these things. She's got her own podcast now, right? I haven't listened to it either, so I don't know what the content is. But that's taking advantage. I mean, there's a break, and that's taking advantage of a break that, listen, we talk about the Kelsey brothers all the time, Jason and
the other guy,
Travis. That could have gone a completely different direction if the Chiefs and the Eagles don't go to the Super Bowl together. Nobody knew who Jason Kelsey was outside of anything. And then, Travis, of course, State's the most famous singer in the world, but that could have gone a completely different direction. They were doing it, and a couple big events came along. And even before Travis, it was big. It wasn't that big. My daughter didn't know about it. Now she does, right?
And if he wasn't dating Taylor Swift, that's another aspect of that whole show.
Listen, that sent it
over the top.
But you have to think, like, his life has radically changed. I mean, he was pretty famous before.
Right.
Now he's uber famous, right?
Yeah.
His life's completely changed. He can never do what he used to do publicly anymore. It's just not ever going to happen. So you got to be willing to say, okay. I mean, most people can't handle that kind of fame. They flame out pretty fast. They get in there.
Yeah.
I mean, look at everyone in Hollywood, drugs and alcohol. It's just, you're like, what? They should have all this money. They should be so happy. Do you realize that the kind of pressure and the comments people make about you, and it's brutal. I don't wish any.
There's a young singer whose name is escaping me. Somebody will throw it in the chat room. But she's basically freaking out because when you're uber famous, and I think she was a child star on some Nickelodeon thing, and now she's super popular. And she basically said, hey, there's don't just come up and touch me. And I don't have to take a selfie. She's like, look, I love my fans, but and she was just freaking out because she's uber famous at this point. And so then she got flack. Hey, no. You wanted fame. Here it is. And this is what you have to do now. And she was kind of like, nah. And then everybody wanted to know who she was voting for. And she was very trying to you know what? It doesn't really matter who I'm voting for. What matters is that you vote. Go out and register. Everybody vote. And they just wouldn't let it drop. And so it's just one of those where well, you want to be famous. Congratulations. Because you can't turn that off.
No.
It's once it's on.
I mean, you can ruin your own fame. Plenty of them have, right?
Yeah.
Plenty of them have. But yeah, it's just a little bit. I mean, I always say be careful what you wish for. Be careful for that. I kind of I like the consistent, nice community, having some influence in that. That's the area I like. I'm solidly average, and I'm okay with it. I am absolutely okay with it. That's where I like to be.
Yeah,
Solidly average.
Stephanie got it. Chapel Roan.
Oh
So
yeah,
who
yeah.
I've never heard a song.
You
It,
have.
it,
You just don't know you have.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I thought that was interesting. John says Haley, Mrs. Tua, wasn't bad as an interviewer. Without a guest, it lacks a little. Couple other things here. Randy, thank you, Randy Black. YouTube views are counted after only 1 second. So 1001. So at that point, it's like, hey, welcome to, okay, well, that's a view. That's interesting. So that's why when you get a view on YouTube, you're like, I don't understand. I have 5,000 views on YouTube, but I've only got 36 listens on my podcast. Well, there's a big difference between, hey, what? Okay. And, a minute in. So speaking of YouTube, one of my favorite YouTubers, and yes, he's a YouTuber, doggone it. Yes, it's a podcast, but I discovered him on YouTube. I watch his stuff on YouTube because it's fun to watch him throw boxes. YouTube is very competitive. The one and only Bandrew Scott from Podcastage. YouTube is very competitive. You need to make content tailored to people's expectation on the platform. Yeah, it's competitive. That's when people are like, there's so many people on YouTube. I'm like, yeah, there is. Think about that. I have a slide where for every 2,000 blog posts, there's one podcast. And I have a picture of Cleveland Brown Stadium, or as we call it, the Factory of Sadness. And it holds I think it's 37,000 people. And I go, great. So if there were 37,000 people in this, I said, if we could have all the podcasters go to the 50-yard line, it's less than 20. And I'm like, so which one is easier to be found in? This giant pool, now that, again, I always sound like I'm anti-YouTube, but I'm not. Just if you want to be there and you love it, then do it. But it's just go in with your eyes open. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Here's the crazy thing about YouTube, right? So I'm watching this guy's channel. His name is James Condon. And that's the name of his channel, James Condon. It's just his name. And he does generator teardowns on a fairly regular basis. So once a week, he gets a donated generator from a listener, or somebody sends him one that they found in a garage that's all rusty and it doesn't work, or the gas tank hasn't been emptied in 4 or 5 years, and he's got to completely rebuild it. He once a week, all he does is tear down and put back together and get generators working and tests them. And the video, he's got a lift in his garage. He's doing this in his garage. He's got a lift so he can get the generator up in the air to see it, so he doesn't have to bend over to do it. His video stuff is not particularly, he could do better, but it shows what he's doing and stuff. He has 194,000 subscribers.
Wow.
to a channel that tears down, fixes generators. This is a couple things that he does really, really, really well. One is he actually creates content, right? He gets stuff out on a regular basis. Two, he's kind of interesting. He's doing the work. Three, he's super. He's actually super helpful to his listeners. He says, hey, I got comments about this or about that, and he's super helpful with it. And 4, he's found his niche. You cannot get any farther down than generators. And this is anything from the small ones, not the big giant ones, but the maybe like 10 or 12K. So I was a generator guy in the military, and so I'm kind of interested in it. So I came across it, and so, but Dave, 194,000 subscribers. The video I'm watching, the one I released, or the one I was watching this morning, just watching this morning. It's in my YouTube thing here. It's got 189,000 views, and it was released a month ago. And some of his videos are 250,000. So,
I need to start putting stuff back on YouTube. This right now is really the only thing I do, and I don't know what got in my mindset, but like I did a thing on Facebook. I uploaded this video and I was explaining how I had my guitar out. And I said, a good co-host, I said, is like rock and roll. I said, because you need a little tension. Somebody that doesn't think exactly like you. So I played a note that's kind of like Bandrew's a guitar player. I played a D and an E at the same time. I'm like, it kind of makes you want to go. And when you then play the chord, you're like, oh, so it's tension and release. And somebody said, why didn't you throw that on YouTube? And I was like, yeah, I guess I could have. Because I'm starting to see more and more people just talking into a camera. It doesn't have to be super duper, that whole 9 yards.
Craig says he's got a diesel generator that overheats. Need to check out that channel. Here's where it kind of goes against the grain. It's not a how-to. He's not saying, he's showing you what he's doing. He's not saying, here's how you do it. He's just showing you, oh, okay, the carburetor's bad. I'm going to rebuild it. And he just does it. It's not like, this is how you do it, tear it down, put it. You just have to watch him. You're going to watch him do it, kind of thing. Or you might get some ideas around it. So another one, and I have to look him up, but another one I watch, this farmer, he's not very far away, maybe about 2 hours into Iowa for me. His name is Cole, and his channel's Cole the Corn Star. And he has the cheesiest, isn't that great? He has the cheesiest intro. He's like, hey, everybody, this is Cole the Corn Star, right? And it's super dorky. This dude gets some views, and he took over his grandpa's farm, and it was a mess. Like there was junk everywhere, and he spent 5 years cleaning it up. And that's what his program is about, farming. He's literally, you're watching the corn grow with him, right? I mean, it's about farming and fixing farming equipment and what's going on in his life. And I kind of think certainly the how-to channels do really, really well on YouTube as well. If you can go in there and say, hey, I've got this dryer, the motherboard has gone out in the dryer. How do I fix this? There are people who will tell you how to do that. Cars, it's giant with cars that way. So I just find it interesting. A lot of folks are doing lifestyle podcasts that are just doing really, really, really well. I think the key, one, they don't take their comments seriously, right? Because if you start trying to fight back with your audience on YouTube in the comments, you're dead.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, you got to have thick skin, right? And then again, consistency. This is where I think a lot of people can't do it, is you just have to, a lot of these YouTubers, they put out something every day or 3 a week or sometimes daily. That's a lot of work. Cole the Corn Star, he's always working. I mean, this guy works from sun up to sundown. And I'm thinking he's got a young family too. And you kind of start to wonder, how sustainable is this?
Right.
How much longer? Seems to be working pretty well, but it is. So there's a lot of, in the YouTube space, there's a lot of room for innovation, but yet people are drawn to lifestyle stuff. They just want to see the real lives of people. This is why reality television was so popular at the beginning, until we all found out it was just WWE repackaged as Survivor. The whole thing is staged, right? You know that, right? Survivor's completely staged, right? All those shows,
oh yeah,
have a script. None of them are actually. They're not leaving anything to chance. Sorry to break the news to you, but there isn't a single reality show that's not scripted anymore, right? So but people, because people are interested in the real lives of other people,
Yeah, my favorite reality, again in quotation marks, was the Gene Simmons Family Jewels, because it just so happened that Gene Simmons, who barely has a driver's license, happened to be driving in Vegas when, he's got a flat tire, and who just happens to show up to help him with a flat tire? Carrot Top. I was like, come on now. Do you really think,
No, right. No, totally.
We're getting a lot of comments here. Ralph from Ask Ralph Podcast says, maybe we need to move away from downloads and views and start seeing if the content moves people to pursue your call to action. That's how I measure my stuff. Stephanie says there's a show called Creator Science, and I don't know how. I've heard about Jay Cruz or Klaus. Yeah, Jay Klaus. Cruz, something. It's Jay. Creator Science, that I remember. That's the part to remember. And he interviewed Dan Meisner, who's the guy from Bumper, previously of Pacific Content. And he was talking about how they go by consumption rate. Like downloads, he said, what downloads mean are a machine successfully moved a file from this point to this point. Doesn't mean they actually listened. So he was saying, when you look at consumption rate, the only way to get that consumption rate to move is to press play. And so Stephanie says, I listened to that. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. That's actually a really good show. And what's interesting is I immediately wanted to, like I shared it in the Podpage Facebook group. I said, this is really good. The guy's talking about making good content. And I sent a thing it took me a while because I had to find Jay's contact information because it wasn't on his website. It drives me nuts. But maybe Jay's getting too much. And I said, hey, I really enjoyed this episode because he asked he asked Dan, he goes, okay, because Dan works with big corporations, but he's helping them make great content. And he said the median percentage completion in Apple Podcasts is 80% of his clients. And to me, that's about what I'm shooting for. That's B. That's a B. B means above average. And if you want to stand out above everyone else, you got to be above average. And so I was like, that's the question I would have asked if I was in the chair. So Jay, thank you for asking the question that I would have asked. And I went over and I was trying to see if I could give Jay money because it really was. I mean, I was telling everybody about it. And, I could buy his $2,000 mastermind, which I thought about. And that's going to be a future episode of the School of Podcasting because it dawned on me, I could bust out some plastic and buy that. It's $2,000 a year. And it looks like something I'd learn a lot. It just needs the time to watch all the videos. And I went, I don't have that. So let's put that credit card back in the wallet for a while. But yeah, it was good stuff. And I'll just briefly hit this. I went to a movie last night. I saw Joker. Horrible. It's a musical. But I've gone to the movie twice now. I've gone to 2 movies in less than a month, and I've not recommended a single one. Beetlejuice, you can definitely wait till it streams. Joker, I wouldn't even watch it. It's a musical, and nobody told me it was a musical. The preview showed a courtroom where he's being very Joker, and it blows up, and you're like, oh, mayhem! This is gonna. No, it was. You watched about 40 minutes of Joaquin Phoenix being moved from place to place with a bunch of cops. And then occasionally they would break in, smile, and the world is laughing. And I love, my logical brain does not understand musicals because I've never just been like, Jim, let's go to the next question. I have to dance now. I don't get musicals. So just for the record, in case you've ever wondered, for those keeping track at home.
We won't break into song anytime soon.
Yeah, they were talking about
do.
the blog.
You take high, I'll take low. I'll do the baseline.
I was talking about the blog post, Chris over at castahead.net. Imagine how that blog versus podcast number has changed since mass AI. Yeah, there's a whole lot of... Here's the interesting thing. I wrote an article that came out of my brain when, something shut down. And when StreamYard changed their prices. And I said, here are 5 alternatives to StreamYard. Got a fair amount of views. Not a ton, but, more than average. And then I started using this AI tool, and it said, based on what you're doing, you should write an article about how to create a free podcast. And I was like, really? Like, that's not even really my jam. And I'm like, okay. But if AI said it, it must be true. So I put it together and explained, here, use Red Circle, don't use Spotify. And here's how, record on your phone, that's free, and blah, blah, blah. 0. Like 0 views. Like I got a blog post on my website. It's been out a week. 0 views this month. And I was like, okay, granted, it's been out a week, but 0. And I was like, but AI said I would get lots of views. And I was like, So, and I know Craig's in the chat room. Adam Curry, not a fan of AI. And I try not to let him influence me. I'm always like, It's definitely, I did an episode on it. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with AI, but Adam Curry spit this out, and I was like, I got to fact check that. But here it is.
Yeah, that same guy wrote a follow-up to it, which is even better. I haven't sent it to you yet. But yeah.
Okay.
So OpenAI, in essence, For every dollar they make, they spend $2.35. Currently. So
it's unsustainable.
They're already talking about, well, everything in technology has always been to reduce costs, and every improvement in technology is supposed to make the system more cost efficient. Less power consumption. Look at the laptops. I mean, it's all about faster processor, lower power consumption, longer battery life. This is the opposite.
Yeah, these costs are going up.
Yeah, we need thorium reactors. Otherwise, we can't handle it.
And he goes on, but I just thought it was interesting that he said
he's dead wrong, by the way.
Okay, well, that was my whole thing, because he's very opinionated in a negative way towards AI, and he keeps getting report after report on how much energy it's going to take, and that's why and he says that it's boots on the ground kind of reporting, but I just thought it was interesting that it just sounds like this is a bad idea, that they're powering up old nuclear reactors because they're going to need the power to handle all these machines doing all this stuff.
That
and I was
Microsoft has purchased or is in an agreement to fire up 3 Mile Island again, right?
Right.
And one of the reactors, of course, doesn't work. If you remember the 70s, it's out of commission. The second one still works, and they're going to fire that up. The point on that, in a point in time, as we are right today, what Adam's saying is true. Like AI, the OpenAI is spending more than they're making, right? They continue to get infusions of cash into that. And the stuff that they're doing is very expensive. The way they're running it, the processes they have to use, the GPUs. I mean, it's kind of a Bitcoin-esque a problem that we have here. These processes that they're running are taking an enormous amount of power to get it done. The point is, though, that's the point of technology, is that it's very expensive to get started. Like think about what in like them or not like them. Think about SpaceX, right, and what they've done. An enormous amount of money went into a whole bunch of rockets that blew up until they got them to land correctly. It used to take us forever, if on NASA's time, when NASA was doing things, disasters, if something blew up on the launch pad, it shut down for 2 years while they reviewed the whole thing.
Right.
When Elon blew up a rocket, he went, data, awesome. Now we know what not to do. Let's do it again, right? And so certainly the startup of both, I'd say the startup of both OpenAI and SpaceX have a lot in common in that they took and are taking an enormous amount of capital to get going. Now, if we would have said that during the beginning of the PC era, the early computers, like, they took way more energy than the benefit that they gave us a lot of times. Those old desktops that we used to run, the heat and the power those things took based on the benefit we got, you couldn't justify. The early computers in the 90s were $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. That's a 90s dollars.
Yeah.
Those would be $15,000 computers today. Did we say in those days, this piece? Well, some people actually did. This PC thing, this is overblown. This isn't going to go anywhere. When the internet came online, right? People were like, "What is this thing for?" Like, this is, and it was expensive. Remember dial-up, and it was slow, and you didn't get much out of it, right? But the point into Adams, he's looking at a point in time right now, and if it stays this way, yes, it's unsustainable. If we can't but the point of technology is that they'll figure out how to do this quicker and better and cheaper and with less power. This will create new things that do it faster and better and cheaper and less power. And so we need to go through this cycle. This is where I think it's just a little short-sighted at this point to say, no, we need to go through this really expensive cycle to get it figured out. They will figure out economies of scale. They will figure out how to get this running cheaper. They will figure this all out. We know these things can't go infinitely this way. It's unaffordable. You can't do it. They'll figure out how to do this. Today, that process is push the LLMs out to the endpoints. So Windows 11 on ARM, the LLMs are actually the models are actually on your desktop. You are the one doing the processing, not them,
Yeah.
right? We've seen this play out before too, in where it goes, it's server-based technologies, and it goes out to the endpoints. The endpoints are you're doing things like that, and then they come back to server technology. We see this go in the technology space back and forth. So the trick will be is how do they scale this in the future, and what do they do to make it more efficient? History would be on their side, would be in favor of it getting better, less energy, less power, some of those kinds of things. So yeah. So I just, Adam, I know you're the pod father and all that other kind of stuff, but it's fairly short sighted. Will this happen? We don't know yet. History is in their favor, but I think we'll get this AI thing figured out, and they'll figure out how to do it in a way that's economical. It's still going to take power, but so did gaming, and so did Bitcoin, and some of those things have been kind of figured out. Now, you may say to me, Jim, no, that's not true. Bitcoin's still a problem. Well, yeah, it actually kind of is. But I don't want to. I'd hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. I think there's going to be some economies that'll take place.
Well, speaking of Bitcoin, because that's something that a lot of people freak out over, and the fact that it takes so much power. Let me bring up a slide. I just had it, doggone it. I forgot. Here we go. Jim, how much? There's an app called Fountain, and it's definitely in the top 2 of when it comes to podcasting 2.0 apps that enable you to stream Satoshis. And in 2023, if you guessed total earnings of podcasters on Fountain, how much do you think they earned?
Oh, in dollars?
In dollars.
And this is value for value in 2023. Let's say $500,000.
That's a great guess. 200,000.
Oh, okay. Well, it's double.
Yeah. 70% of the income is from people boosting. And if you're new to this, Boost is where you can basically, when you're using a new podcast app at newpodcastapps.com, you can say it's sending the host a message, but you also send them money. So now this is in the form of Satoshis, which is a very, 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 very small amount of Bitcoin. But the largest boost amount, want to guess what that was?
Out of that 200,000, I'm going to say the largest boost was $100.
Great guess. You've underbid.
Oh,
$340.
Oh,
somebody said, "Here, have $340." I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
The average boost amount, $4.75.
Yeah.
Now, if you can get 3% of your audience to give you $5, that would be cool. 70% was earned from boosts. So there's 30% though, that those are people that are just every minute they're giving you a little bit. It's like, here's another penny, here's another penny, here's another penny. 42,000 boosts. 42,000 boosts were sent in 2023. That's just one app. And podcasters with the most supporters, 1,400. So there's that 1,000 true fans. So that was in I'll put a link in the show notes, but this was I think like Podcasting 2.0 and Captivate or something like that. And I thought they were announcing a new feature, and it was basically, it's really easy to set up your show to receive Bitcoin. I guess right now, if somebody said, how do I get involved with this? It looks like at this point, you go over and set up a Fountain account in the app. I need to go look at this app. I know every time I look at it, because now they're getting into this thing called Nostr, which is like notes and stuff. I forget what it stands for, but it's another way to zip and zap and boost. And it's that podcast is made for people that like Bitcoin, in my opinion. There's a lot going on, but they talked about how you can see, like I can see, wow, Jim keeps boosting this guy 3,000 Satoshis. Like, what is Jim like listening to that he keeps giving them money? So it's another form of discoverability. And I was like, and then they have charts. Here's the, Curry and the Keepers, like in the top 10. And they're basing that on how much money people are streaming to these things. And I was like, So I know it used to be I would tell people go get there's a company called Albi, and I go get an Albi wallet, it's a piece of cake. And then Albi understandably got a little nervous because if everybody and their brother uses your wallet system, the U.S. government starts to go, are you doing money laundering by any chance? There's something going on over there. And I did hear on an episode that they are working on something to replace that that's not so centralized. So I keep, every time I listen to Podcasting 2.0, I'm like, okay, so it's not quite ready for me to go, everybody go do this. This is the new way to do it. But right now, if somebody said, no, I want to get involved with this, I'd say get an Albi wallet, and then Albi will give you basically an email address that when somebody sends Satoshis to that email address, it goes into your wallet. So they're holding on to your money. Now maybe that's not the right phrase, but they have a bucket for you to put your money in, and they don't control it, but they're being very nice. It's called a custodial wallet. They're like, hey, we'll hold your money. It's yours. It's yours. We're just going to hold it for you. And so that's the part that's kind of tricky about it. But I saw that and I was like, man, that caught my eye, because that's just one app. There's Fountain, there's Cast-O-Matic, there's all these other apps. I really wish right now my favorite app is Pocket Cast because of this bookmark feature that I love. Just because I can go, well, also Adam talked about why Spotify, because I haven't heard it yet, but the kind of head of podcasting for Spotify was on Pod News Weekly, and they were talking, it drives me nuts when I hear, well, if the audience thinks it's a podcast and the teacher in me goes, then you tell them they're wrong. Like, that's not a podcast. And then everybody calls me a curmudgeon. I'm like, but it's ruined stats, But the fact that I can click this button and Adam will say,
so to say that it doesn't matter how it's distributed, it does. It does matter, because you're not in control. And how many times do we see someone get kicked off of YouTube? How long before you build up your audience with video on Spotify, which only is on Spotify, before something happens? Or you're not in control. That was the whole point.
So I love that I can just, like, for clips like this, or I'll see this like, I want to talk about this on the School of Podcasting or whatever. I love that bookmark feature. They have transcript, they have chapters. Pocket Cast doesn't have, and every time they say, hey, we just launched transcripts, I email them back and go, when are you adding streaming Satoshis? Because they have everything I want except that. And Podcast Guru has everything I want, except now I found out about a new feature called bookmarks, and they don't have that. And I was like, So I listen to my Podcasting 2.0 shows in Podcast Guru, and then everything else I listen to in Pocket Cast right now. Are you still an Overcast guy?
Yeah.
Jim?
Yep. Yeah. Listen, with streaming Satoshis, be very, very careful. I can't speak for other places around the world. In the United States, the IRS treats it treats it differently than it's income, right? And it's investment income, and you're gonna in some places you're just going to have to be careful with your taxes on this. So eyes wide open, friends. If you're going to go in, make sure you understand this is a taxable event for you in some in some regard. You're going to have to, at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, you're going to need to think through, hey, I got to account for this, just like you would account for your Amazon affiliate stuff or any advertising money that you made. These Satoshis that you're getting are not free. You're going to need to account for them. So just and they're treated a little bit different. So just make sure you consult your tax advisor before you dig into that thing.
Yeah, I have yet to make more Satoshis than I give out. Like, I have people streaming sats, and then I look at but the minute I send a boost of 2,222, because they jokingly call that a row of ducks. It's there goes my Satoshis. So
well, but it's not. It's tax like so. Say
it's still income.
Get a Satoshi. Say you get a Satoshi, and then its value increases. That's a tax liability for you, and as it increases. If it decreases, it gets complicated, right? I mean, this is the thing. This is why I'm not a huge fan of, because I think it creates the United States government from a tax situation has not figured out how to deal with Bitcoin yet. And so it's still a little weird from that. It just is. Now it's getting better, and some of the crypto companies like a Coinbase is helping you. They're wanting to help you deal with that. But I'm a little concerned about the average podcaster who is like, oh yeah, I'm just going to sign up for this and get this, and then they get the tax bill, or they'd have to figure out how to report it on their taxes, or
convert it
like,
to money to,
I got to get a CPA to figure this thing out. Right.
Yeah.
So just eyes wide open, friends. If you're going in on this gathering of Satoshis, eyes wide open, friends.
Yeah.
Make sure you know what you're doing before you.
Well, Dan said Fountain had an ad program for podcaster, and it worked pretty well for him. And then Randy said their promotions, though, might be a little sketchy. Over half of my listens came from Nepal. Now, why would folks in Nepal listen to a value for value music show? I think it has more so to get the sats for their promotion. So, Bandrew says $4 boost is amazing. That's tremendous. Now, Bandrew, speaking of value for value, used to have ads turned on his YouTube channel, which is huge. And he went value for value. So when I get done, I need to go send him here's the thing, Bandrew. I know I can give you a super chat. Is there some place on your website, podcastage.com, that I could give you PayPal so that Google doesn't get their 20, 30%? It's 30%, right? I should look that number up, but it's a lot. And not that I don't want Google to not stay in business, but if I want to give money to Bandrew, because I love his show, I need to, go. And that's the thing that dawned on me, going briefly back to the movie thing. I spent $30 on the movies. It was $28 and some change, and have gotten zero value. But yet I listen to Bandrew every week, and I'm like, okay, well, I should be giving him $30 if he's more entertaining than, Joaquin Phoenix singing with bad makeup. So, I should be giving him money for that. And we kind of, unfortunately, just, podcasts are free. Well, they are, but, if you want that person to stick around and do this, unless they're like Bandrew and just love sniffing and licking microphones, that's why his channel's so special. He's just over there just grabbing microphones and just, this one has a hint of strawberry and mint. He really does amazing interviews. So, it's just one of those things. Sometimes yay, that guy gave me value. I want to give it back. So, Dan says, I always ask the listeners how they found my show and got a wave mentioning they came from Fountain after they ran ads. Ralph from Ask Ralph Podcast spent a boatload of money on ads in Overcast, and 30% of his audience now is from Overcast. So if you've got the budget, and that makes sense if you think about it, right? You're trying to get in front of podcast listeners, advertising in a podcast app. 100%. Every one of those people listens to podcasts. So from a strategy, it makes sense. So, and then this is the part I never do. Jody Krangle's in the house. She says, so how long does it take you to be able to actually move that Bitcoin into funds you can use? And that's where for me, it's always broken down. In fact, even now that Albi has kind of backed away, I have to go into Strike. It's this app, and I tied it to, and I had to do the hokey pokey and turn myself around to connect it to my bank, which I want. I want a lot of security around that. And then I can go in and basically say, okay, I want to send $20 to my Albi wallet, and Albi gives me a QR code, which I then can copy the QR code and paste it into, we've already lost Aunt Cheryl. We lost her a long time ago. And so when I copy that and paste it into Strike will go over my bank, get $20, pay to Albi. I was like, it just needs to be, to quote the man from Apple when I was talking to him about it, he said, it needs to be easy. And we're not there yet. So that's why if people, I've not cooled my thoughts on podcasting 2.0. I still think it's the future. I think it's the way I want it to go. I don't want to have ads and all this other stuff. I would love to have a direct connection with my audience. it's just not there yet. And that's why I'm really dying for them to come out with what are we going to replace Alby with. And I know there are multiple companies that they're working on. So
yeah, if it were me, I'd have a Coinbase account. They're one of the leaders right in this, and then you could move, and that the moving of the Bitcoin around is not too hard. You just in Coinbase get an account number, copy that, like you're saying, copy and paste that, and it moves. On the Bitcoin network, that can take an hour. It can take 6 hours. It can take. This is one of the problems of the crypto, right? Especially with Bitcoin. You just don't know, and you don't know, the just depends on how busy the network is and some of, what's going on. You're also going to pay some fees to move that. And I'm not anti-fee, but sometimes the fees are higher than what you're trying to move.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to be moving, $1 around. I don't move much out of crypto or into fiat, your local money that you can spend, your local currency, very often, just because, again, there's tax implications every time you move that, every time you sell to do something. And when you're buying something with Bitcoin, you're selling Bitcoin to do it. So there's some implications there. Dave, what I hear you saying, I still think it is still a little too complicated for the average person. Yeah.
It's not,
we do need to make it easier.
For the average person, that's the key, because like Randall Black, right? IT guy for a school system. So he's like, it's a piece of cake. And he's the guy. It's like, I'll fire up a CDN. I'll make my own podcast and use. And I'm like, that's because you're Randy. Difference. He has a very specific skill set, and he will find you and make a podcast for you.
Dan makes a good point. He says, hey, it takes 3 to 5 business days along with a fee to move USD from his one bank account to another. And that's true. Those, right. I mean, we still, yes, I'm not saying the banking system is any better. If you understood, like for a traditional bank, if you understood how old school moving money is, in the way they do it these days, it's bad. It's still, they're using like 60s and 70s technology in some cases, maybe 80s if they're up to speed, to get some of that stuff moved. So I'm not saying that U.S. banking is better than Bitcoin or whatever. Just again, eyes wide open on this. I think we think, oh yeah, that's new and it's shiny and it's awesome. And you're like, well, okay, it is new and it is shiny. There's some limitations and some drawbacks to it as well. Just know what you're getting yourself into with it, and know it's based. This is the other thing, folks, here in the United States. This is we're insulated for the most part from fluctuating currency prices, right? The U.S. dollar is fairly stable. It does move around, but it's fairly stable. We don't see that. In fact, we just went through a period of inflation where a lot of people complained because of that, right? Now, imagine going through a period of inflation and deflation within a matter of weeks. So something costs $10 and then it costs $20 and then it's $7 and then it's $19. That's the fluctuation that you see with Bitcoin, right? And its value, especially against the US dollar. So you are, if you didn't like the not knowing what things were going to cost over the last couple years, you're if you're gonna buy into this crypto stuff, that thing has moved around hard in the last year or two, and it goes both up and down, right? And so it's moving around. Things could be more expensive, things could be less expensive for you. Again, I'm not saying I'm not against it. I have some, I do some, but just know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, the chat room's been going crazy. Gary has a great point. We're talking about YouTube. October 15th, YouTube Shorts will expand from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. Woo-hoo. That's going to be interesting. Jeff C says, I don't know how SEO as we know it is going to survive. I think everything else that's one where I'm worried about all the ChatGPT stuff, because if you're not in that database,
right,
you're screwed, and SEO goes right out the door. And thank you. I kept saying J. Cruz. I think that's some sort of brand. It's J. Klaus. at Creator Science. And he used to run Pat Flynn's. That's where I first heard about Jay. He was running Pat Flynn's community. And I was like, oh, that guy must have some chops and something like that. So Stephanie says, I have videos of my podcast that I want to add to my YouTube, but I need to make them jazzy somehow. And for that, our awesome supporter, castahead.net, Chris Stone can do that. He makes really beautiful. In fact, Gary agrees. He says, Chris over at castahead.net, the current weekly supporter. And then I think that's all the ones I had. Oh, Randy, YouTube was 50% on super chats. If that's the case, that hurts. I mean, I love, 50% is better than 0%, but ouch. So icky. Let's thank some people. And then maybe we'll do a little, what do you call that thing? Power rant. Are awesome. Yeah, we have things I'm seeing that I'm like, oh, please, no, don't do that.
Hasn't this whole show just been a power rant?
That's true. Good point. Oh, come on now. I'm stuck again. Here we go. Yes, you can be an awesome supporter by going over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. Please notice that is a link tied to my brand. I'm not saying go to patreon.com/Dave Jackson, because while I have a Patreon, I'm now using Supercast. So by going to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome, I control that. So keep that in mind. And the show is brought to you by the School of Podcasting. You can get courses, you can get unlimited coaching, and a really, really awesome community. Use the coupon code COACH when you sign up for either a monthly or yearly subscription, and that comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. And Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage. If you want to try Podpage, check out trypodpage.com. That's my affiliate link. And we're using eCam right now. You can go to askthepodcastcoach.com/eCam. It's, in fact, in 2 weeks, remind me to look this up, but Jeff would know. Jeff, see, when is eCam Creator Camp? Because that's on a Saturday and I won't be here. I'll be in Baston, parking my car. If you need more Jim Collison, and who doesn't, go over to either, take your pick. It could be the averageguy.tv, or if you want to be crazy, you can go to homegadgetgeeks.com. It's the same thing. So, and it's time for our awesome featured supporter of the week. And let's see if it's, I've just Windows plenty on this screen when I do this. And we'll close some ads. And is it Craig from AI Goes to College, Randy from Bible Bites, Greg over at Indie Drop In, Chris, could Chris make it 4 weeks in a row? He's just been crazy over here. Or Ask Ralph at AskRalphPodcast.com, or Jody Kringle and the Audio Branding Show. Well, we'll find out when I click spin. And the winner is Max Trescott over at AviationNewsTalk.com. It was this close to being Jody. And then, so thank you, Max, for being an awesome supporter. And I swear I want to, this is where I always have a train wreck. And it's interesting if I just, if I just go back to here, there we go. That will do it. If the show saves you time, if it saves you money, if it saves you a headache, if it keeps you educated, or maybe we're just entertaining, then maybe you should consider going over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And yes, it is time for, let me hit the jingle.
And now it's time for a power rant.
In fact, I'm going to stand up. I have to. It's a power rant, kids. Can I do this? Is that going to work? Can you hear that? That motor.
The motor, yes.
The motor. All right. Well, anyway, please quit doing this. I don't know why, but I see these and I'm just like, wait, what? Why are you doing? It doesn't make any sense. So, and that is, I saw this come through. I'm working on intentionally minimalist and low budget podcast that will be audio only. I'm not concerned about the audio quality. Well, first things first, maybe you should. As long as it's possible to understand what's being said. Okay, so he's going for listenable, not pristine. Okay, that's all I care about for now. Ideally, each person, usually will be 3 total in different locations, could dial into a conference call type system. So that's right there. No. And phone calls. So you think somebody's going to listen to a show that sounds like this? Nobody wants to listen to a podcast. Charlie Brown's teacher does not have a podcast. That's all I care about for now. Conference call type system. I personally love to have headphones in and walk around my house while talking. And this is the part that's driving me nuts. When you do your podcast, do your podcast. All these people are like, I want to do a walk and talk. Why? Do you think it's like, oh, I would listen to these people do interviews, but you know what would make it better? If they were walking around so I could hear gravel under their feet. I'm like, no, when you do a podcast, do your podcast. Like, focus on your podcast. To quote the great Mr. Taylor, better known as Travis Kelce, podcasting is harder than football. And it requires attention and focus. And you're like, I remember once, I did this once on a weight loss show. And my audience loved it. Why? Because I got the crap scared out of me by a dog that came running at me, and thankfully there was a fence. So this whole, I know what I'm going to do. I'm so busy, I'm going to podcast from the car. I'm going to walk and talk. I'm going to, no, quit. When you do your podcast, especially if you're interviewing people, take the time and, just focus on listening to them. So that's my power rant for the day. What say you, Jim Cullison?
Oh, I agree with you. I think that's the smart. Now, could you do it from the car? You can, because we're not here to tell you what you can and you can't do. But a lot of folks, when they hear bad audio, and I struggle with this. One of my very favorite podcasts, about every third show, they go remote to do interviews, and the audio is terrible. You can tell they sat down at a table in somebody's kitchen and they put a microphone in the middle of the table, and it's far away, and the content is great. I mean, it's still amazing content. I kind of have to psych myself up to listen to it. I'll hear the interview start, and it's distance, it sounds like they're 1,000 miles away from their microphone. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go listen to another podcast and get myself ready. Cause it hurts. It almost takes more energy. I feel like after listening to an episode with bad audio, I need a break. Like I need to, go take a walk. So it does matter. And the better you can make the audio, the easier you're physically making it easier on your audience to listen. And if they're listening via earbuds, it's even worse to have this room echo or this, whatever you're doing. Please, I get people all the time that I'm interviewing, and they bought, since the pandemic, they bought a puck that's 4 miles away, and they're like, well, everybody else says it sounds okay. And I'm like, well, nobody else cares except me, and you sound terrible. So
right.
Can we get a headset? Can we get a microphone on you? I mean, it does matter. I think it does matter. It physically makes it easier to hear.
There might be exceptions. I've never listened to it, but I know a listener of the School of Podcasting does Walking is Fitness, and he walks around and talks and does this. Okay. So, and I know everybody's I saw in the chat room there already, what about Kevin Nealon? Well, Kevin Nealon is a famous comedian. So step one, be Kevin Nealon, and then have a staff of at least 2, because I know he's got a cameraman behind them and a cameraman in front of them. And he's also interviewing Sheryl Crow. So number 2, get Sheryl Crow as a guest. Now, if I was going to do that, if I'm like, no, I really want to walk and talk, I would go by Chris had him when I was in Atlanta. I got to hang out with Chris Stone. And he had the little Shure clip-on microphone thingies, and they have noise canceling. And that's the part that always makes me kind of scratch my head. I want to do a walk and talk, but I do want to take out some of the background noise. I'm like, well, then don't do it outside. Like if you're trying to get rid of background noise, maybe record someplace that, I don't know, doesn't have background noise. But most of the time they want the background noise, so you can turn that off. But that would be the easiest way to do a walk and talk. Get a Shure, clip those little things on, do your walk and talk, and go that route. When I see people like, I want to podcast in the car, I go, that is the definition of distracted driving.
that there's the safety reasons too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and you could be like, no, I'm okay. I'm, there are actually some studies that just talking on your phone engages your brain in a way that distracts you as much as drunk driving. So we talk about this hands-free thing, and no, I'm still paying attention. No, you're talking to somebody else, and your brain is actually distracted and creating images as you're talking to somebody else. Your brain is actually imagining that person, and it's now you're not concentrating on the car in front of you kind of thing, or around you, or so. Yeah, it's safety wise, it's probably because now you're thinking about the content creation that's going on around
Right.
you. And so, yeah, probably not a great idea. Even if you get really good sound, it's probably not the safest idea. I tell you what, I move my mic away from where it's at right now, and I do the rest of the podcast with you barely hearing me. The chat room loses their effing minds, right? At this point, Dave, anytime you and I have any kind of audio problem, for the longest time, like you were louder than me, and you still might be louder than me, or I might be louder than you. We get those comments in chat immediately. Like, so does it matter? It absolutely matters. Absolutely.
Yeah, we talked about this in a School of Podcasting group coaching, and Craig from AI Goes to College said the minute I have to ride the volume knob, it's sorry. Yeah. We'll see you next week. Hope you can get your sound better, kind of thing. Yeah, I am actually looking. I'm right now. I'm in theory on the meters. I'm this much louder than you are, but that's
No, but we know the chat room.
Yeah, the chat room will let us know.
Either they're putting up with it, but the point was not that you need to fix it right now. That's not the point. The point was it matters to people, and we have now our audience is mostly podcasters, so they're concerned about it in some way, and we're preaching to the choir on this one, at least with who we have in the chat room here this morning.
Right.
But it does matter. The people are like, can't hear you, echo. I mean, how many times I come in with an echo, for a while we were having that problem, and echo, I hear echo. I mean, the chat room's so fast to let us
immediately
know.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Gary says, I just brought the Rode Wireless Pro, which has 32-bit float, which means you can almost not record bad audio. The only thing why I would recommend the Shure thing is if you're doing just audio, then yeah, probably a Rode Wireless Pro would be the way to go. Because again, you can't get bad audio aside from plosives. But you are basically clipping a pager to you. It looks like it's 1986, and you've got this big square thing. Where if I was doing video, I would go with the Shure mic, and then you can actually just stream right to your phone. So as always, it depends. What you're doing. I thought this was an interesting question. Says, I have a podcast that is 25 episodes in about a niche topic. We have some friends that have businesses in their niche topics that we promote more or less for free. Well, don't do that, but okay. Unless they have a link to your show on their website. We've been approached recently by an author that wants to sponsor the show. Well, first thing I would say is, does that person's book match your audience? We're not sure what to charge him or ask in return. We currently get 25,000 downloads a month. Monthly stats are crap, all right? Because what you need, and the reason I say that is a monthly stat is based on how many episodes. Like I'll give you an example. The School of Podcasting first episode came out April 2005. Still gets downloads. If that gets downloaded in October, it counts as part of this monthly download. So that show has 900 plus episodes. So, but like it was something, I want to say 40% of my downloads in a month at the School of Podcasting come from episodes that were released in this month. The other 60% was my back catalog, because I have a huge back catalog. So monthly stats don't count when you're quoting sponsors. And we release a new episode weekly. Great. So you want to look at how many episodes you got per episode after 30 days. We're constantly growing and promote our show heavily on Instagram. Any advice on how we should proceed? So how do you charge? This is where in negotiations, if you read any book on negotiation, they will tell you to let the other person say a price first. And part of that is they're not sure they don't want to offend you, but they don't want it to be too low, because then you'll be like, how dare you, $10, So I always ask them, just because I watch Shark Tank, like, what is your cost? What is your customer acquisition cost? Which makes you sound so brilliantly smart. What is your customer acquisition cost? And if they know that, then take that. And if I had, let's do fun math with Dave. If I get 300 downloads an episode, right, and I times that by our magic 0.03, that's 3%. That means I'm going to have 9 people that might take action on that. So if he says my customer acquisition cost is $12, then I take that 9 people times 12, and that gives me $108. That's for the podcast. Then you want to go, well, how much to be featured in the website? Because it's one thing to say, it's another thing to have a link in the show notes, and then the newsletter. So and then whatever number you come up with, when you start to feel uncomfortable and you're like, so you're saying $108, I go, yep, an episode. Now I realize that the first 9 people that sign up on that first episode are not going to sign up again, but the answer is, I don't know that there is an official, like, just follow this kind of math, but this will give you an idea of, how many people are going to take action, how much money they're going to make. And then, that's where if you ask them the price, how much is your customer acquisition cost? And then my whole thing is, whatever it is. So if you come up and you're like, well, that'd be like around $110. Great. Tell them 150, because we all underserve our audience, especially if it's a niche audience and that guy's trying to get into, people that like street hockey. All right, well, there's only 3 other shows about street hockey and you're the biggest one. Raise that price. So I don't know. Jim, any thoughts?
Well, just know, if you say 150 and he says, I was thinking 120, and you say yes, you are now open for negotiation every time they renew. So if you don't like negotiating, don't. Say 150. If they say no, or if they ask for less, don't take it. You have to, like, if you want to be in the negotiation game, then negotiate right out of the chute, right? And get that thing if you like that. Some people really like that, and that's fine. If you don't like it, a lot of people don't do it from the very beginning, right? But I'm with you, Dave. I think, and then I'll say one more thing on that. I think a lot of folks get stuck in they can't figure out a price, and so they don't do it very well. They're like, no, I just don't want to do this. You got to do it. You got to do it at least once. Pick a price that sounds fair and say it. Stay with it. If they say no, and you don't want to negotiate, don't. But the next time somebody asks for this, you go a little bit lower, right? Till you find what the market is going to bear. This is supply and demand and basic market economics, right? How much is your car, the car you're currently driving, how much is it worth? Well, people say, well, Kelly Blue Book. Well, that's just an estimate. It's actually worth what someone will pay for it, right? That's what it's worth today. Right now, EVs are, they were popular. Right now, they're taking it on the chin a little bit, and they're not buying a used one. They're or trading one in. They get a little less for them because they're not popular right now, right? The resale value is taking a hit. So with your podcast, I always say, set that amount, and if they say no, the next time they ask, drop it down a little bit until you find what the market is willing to bear. Then, as you have customers come to you, as you have folks come in, start raising that price a little bit, right? Or keep it the same if that's the right. You can keep it the same, but raise it a little bit till people start saying no. Then you'll find that spot where you're comfortable with what you're doing. Your podcast is unique. It's not like anything else. So you can't say, well, I looked it up in the book and it says this. No, your podcast's too unique for that. You're too unique for that. You have your own value associated with it. You need to do your own market research, and you can do it live with people. If you charge too little, well, the next time charge more. Be good enough that you can charge more the next time. Eventually people will start saying no, and then you've charged enough at that point.
That's it. In fact, that strategy is mentioned in the book. Profit
Amazing.
from your podcast. One Joe Salsihai from Stacking Benjamins, he says, you're leaving money on the table until you've heard no. And I was like, that's a really good point.
Right.
So
no, it's very common. It's very common technique. It's not complicated. Just wait for them to start saying no, and then like, okay, I've charged enough. And if they say yes too quick, you probably haven't charged enough. But it's all right. You've already said it. You can move that up with your next customer. Or the other thing is, don't commit forever, right, on these things. Kind of like, well, how much? Well, it's $50 a show forever. So if I sign a contract, does that mean you're locking in $50 for forever? Well, maybe, but say you could say something like, well, my 2024 pricing is $50 a show, and I release new pricing every October for the next year, kind of thing. So that way you can have a way to raise prices if you need to.
Yeah, I've seen that too, where people go like, all right, the first month will be X amount of money, and months 2 and 3, like, we're giving you a special discount as a new customer. The first month is 10% off. Second month is this. Third month is this, and it's a 3-month minimum purchase or something like that. So it's always kind of tricky. The chat room had some comments on the lav mics. Ralph says, I was using the Shure Move mic for my show because I do video, but I went back to a regular mic because people told me the microphone in the shot gives me street cred. Well, if we ask people what a podcast is people talking to each other with microphones. That's a podcast. Don't get me started. Gary says the Pro also includes a couple of nice lavs, and Brander says, yeah, and yet no one uses them. So that would be another thing you could do with I didn't realize the Pro came with lavs. That's kind of a cool setup. But here's a fun one. This is an easy one. They say, I don't have an RSS feed or a host. I'm getting ready to publish my second podcast. I'm hoping they mean episode and not show. My first one, nope, they mean show. My first one was a short 10 episode with a friend of mine. We self-published on Spotify and Apple. I plan on doing it the same way, but I'm doing myself a disservice by not having a host or RSS or using Podbean or a similar site. It is a pain uploading the same info and tags to each site and episode. Again, copy, paste. But I don't want to miss an opportunity for growth. Should I be doing these other things? Well, yes, you need an RSS feed. So, am I doing it wrong? Yes, you're absolutely doing it wrong. RSS, that last S and S stands for syndication. So you upload it in one place and you put it, excuse me. What? We're not done. Okay.
Bless you again.
Yeah. And the furnace hasn't even kicked on. That's what I'm waiting for. When the furnace kicks on and it's like, the smell of burnt dust. Oh, yeah. But you need an RSS feed, and get yourself something like Text Expander. I love Text Expander. I use it a lot in support. And if you ever see Pod Page and it says, let me know if you have any other questions, I'm always happy to help. I actually didn't type that. I just typed in #TY and it types that. So if you're typing the same things over and over, you can do that. If you're using Captivate, they have, you can use a template that you make. So if you're always going to put in the same tags and things like that, you can set that up so that you don't have to type it over and over and over and over. So, Craig's talking about pricing. He says, I had that happen with a job once. They asked me what salary I wanted. I gave a figure and they immediately said, okay. And it left lots of money on the table. Yeah, there's nothing worse than going, when you go, I don't know, 200, and they go, okay. Like, I should have said 400. So,
well, maybe like that can backfire on you too. You may have actually just hit what their budget was, and they're like,
that's true too.
Awesome. Okay. That's great. And so, yeah, be careful. Don't feel too bad. You might've just hit the sweet spot in that. And I don't know. I'm not a big negotiating fan. I'm just not very good at it. And so I always shirk away from it, but don't always feel like you've gotten screwed or you've left money on the table. When I bought my most recent car, I went in and the sticker price was,
right,
I think 27, right? And I said, I'm taking this car. And he's like, do you want to drive it? I'm like, no, this is the car I want. He was like, really? I'm like, yeah, no, I've done the work. I'll drive
Yeah.
this one away. This is fine. And he's like, okay. And he goes, you should drive one. So we drove another one. But afterwards, he's like, so we sit down and we do the paperwork. And he's like, well, I said, is this the part where we negotiate? He's like, well, do you want to? And I'm like, well, yeah. He's like, well, tell me a price. And I'm like, 26. He goes, that's fine. And and if I could have gotten obnoxious with that and been like 22 and then gone through the whole thing with it, but it was valuable to me. Could I have gotten it cheaper? Yeah. Could I have paid more for it? Yeah. And I'm really bad about this. At some point, just buy the damn thing and move on.
Yeah.
Stop trying to milk every single penny. And listen, this is physician heal thyself. Maybe I'm
Right.
just talking to myself here, right? In that milk every single, I could have got it 3 cents cheaper. Well, your time is worth something. So just buy it, move on. You're fine.
And the worst strategy for car negotiations is when your car dies driving onto the lot. That happened to me. Like, I have to buy a car to get home. That is not a good negotiation strategy. So the week of the 18th is when Creator Camp is. I'm not sure. I guess if I click on a calendar, we could figure this out. Okay, so yes, I am flying back the 19th. So there will be no show October 19th for Ask the Podcast Coach. I'll be coming back from, but I'll have pictures of me taking a selfie.
Now, right?
Yeah, with Jeff C. So that'll be cool. Jeff C's there. There's a guy named Dan that does a lot of videos about DaVinci Resolve. He's there. Alec, the guy that does who I learned Ecamm from, is going to be there. So I'm looking forward to it. I've just got to get caught. I didn't realize there was homework. Like, I thought this was go to the conference, sit there, listen to people, fly. No, there's homework. And I'm like, oh, because they were doing everything in Discord, and I'm just not a fan of Discord. I'm like, I'm old. Like, email me. And they had the wrong email or something. But looking forward to that. So yeah, in 2 weeks we'll be taking a week off. So at any rate, Jim, what's coming up on Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, Dan Lefebvre joined me this week. Dan from
Holy
Based
cow.
on a True Story, based-on-true-story-podcast.com. We talked a little bit about CGI and movies a little bit, and then we looked at the Elgato prompter. He did a little hands-on, not necessarily a review, but we talked about it. We talked about the idea of looking into the camera, and does it matter if you are looking away or looking above? A whole discussion around that. I thought it was helpful to me. It was good. So available right now, and Dan, thanks for coming on, but available right now, homegadgetgeeks.com.
Excellent. On the School of Podcasting, you did something I haven't done. I've tried it a couple of times and it never really worked. I had somebody that was a consulting client, and I'm going to basically take that show, kind of make it in an NPR style narrative thing. So it'll be great for the questions you need to ask if you're thinking of starting a podcast, because his title made no sense. I'll just give you that one. He told me what it was. I go, I have no idea what that show's about. If I said Big Orange Dad to you, Jim, what do you think that show's about?
Big Orange Dad? Donald Trump, maybe?
No.
I don't know.
It turns out he's in Tennessee, and orange is the color of the football team.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, I'd go, now, see, that might be one you ask people and go, what do you think it's about? And if he's asking his friends in Tennessee, they're like, oh, it's about being a dad and, football fans. I'm like, okay, maybe not. But that's what's coming up on the School of Podcasting. Holy cow, super chat from Mr. Craig Van Slyke. Check him out. AI Goes to College. Thank you so much for that, Craig. And we will see you next week. We will be here next week. As always, askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Everybody like, subscribe, and ring the bell. We'll see you.